Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. In today's video, I'll be using Honeybee Stamps Bountiful Banner stamp set. I also have the coordinating dies and the coordinating stencil set. For a little bit of texture, I'm using the new Burlap 3D embossing folder. And for pattern paper, I'll be using both of the new paper pads, Homestead Harvest and Pinstripes and Polkadots Harvest. I've already gone ahead and stamped the single flowers and single leaves. There are several different stencils included in the set. I'm starting off with the one that's labeled large flowers. Once I find the opening, I'll line it up with the stamp flower. The ink color I'm using is from Catherine Pooler. This is the polished color. Once I have both of the flowers stenciled, I'll start working on the leaves. There are two different stencils for the leaves, Big Leaves number 1 and Big Leaves number 2. I'm not sure which one I'm using at the moment. Each stencil has the opening for one half of the leaf, so you can create a fun two-tone leaf. I'm using two different brown ink colors by Catherine Pooler. The first one is Sandcastle, which is a lighter brown. The second color is Over Coffee. And I'm using a little extra ink to get a darker color on that second half of the leaf. Once I finish with the first leaf, I'll rotate the stencil, line it up, then ink up the second half of the leaf. The last stencil layer I'm using is labeled Banner and Berries. It also has the inside area of the flowers. And that's the part I'll be using. The ink color is from Honeybee Stamps. It's their metallic gold pigment ink. Once I line up the stencil with the flower, I'll use a domed blender brush and press the ink through the stencil onto the flower. And now the flower will have this beautiful metallic shine in the center. Now I'll pull out the coordinating dies. I love that Honeybee Stamps always has coordinating dies for all of the images and sentiments. I'll line up the die, hold it in place with some tacky tape. Now I'll pull out Honeybee Stamps Bitty Buzz Cutter. It's nice to have a small die cut machine that fits on my craft table, perfect when cutting out small images or sentiments. I'll first cut out the flowers, then I'll do the leaves. I think their dies cut out the perfect amount of white border around the images and sentiment. I'll pop out the leaves and the flowers, put the dies away so I don't lose them. Off camera, I stamped and stenciled another flower and 2 more leaves. I'll set those aside for now. I've already stamped out the sentiment Happy Autumn. I stamped it on some of the Pinstripes and Polkadot Harvest collection. I'll line up the coordinating die, run it through my Bitty Buzz Cutter. Using the same die, I also cut out a piece from some gold pearlescent cardstock. Using Barely Art glue, I'll layer the 2 pieces together, creating a pretty gold drop shadow underneath the sentiment. Now I'll set that aside and start working on my card. I will be using a card sketch for inspiration. This is from Freshly Made Sketches. It's number 603. I selected 2 pattern papers from the Homestead Harvest collection. This is a beautiful paper pad, one of my favorites from Honeybee Stamps, although I think I say that every time they release a new paper pad. I selected this lovely floral paper for the background and a light pink, sort of watercolor looking design. I'm layering both pieces on some dark brown cardstock. My cardstock layers are an additional 1/8 of an inch. So the background floral pattern paper is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And the brown cardstock layer is 4 1/8 of an inch by 5 3/8 of an inch. After putting adhesive on the back, I put my card front onto a card base, leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. I decided to pop up the narrow pink strip on the right side of the card. I used Honeybee Stamps black foam strips. Next, I'll add the sentiment. I'm putting some thick foam dimension on the very right side of the sentiment and a few small squares on the left side, just on the areas where it goes off of that narrow pink strip. I'm also adding a small scrap piece of cardstock in the area that sits on that pink strip, and that'll help keep everything at the same level. I'll adhere the sentiment in place. Next, I'll add 2 leaves. Since one of them is mostly off the pink strip, I did put some foam dimension on the back. Then I'll adhere the other leaf in place with some glue. I am popping up all of the flowers using some thin foam squares. I'll remove the release paper, add my first pink flower. Now I'll adhere another leaf, this one on the right side of that pink strip. Then I'll add a second pink flower. Then I'll add the final leaf and the last pink flower. Using the same dark brown cardstock, I'll cut a small banner and adhere it in the upper left-hand corner. I'll first cut a fishtail on the bottom, then cut the right side in slightly at an angle, flip it over, do the same thing on the other side, then I'll put glue on the back and adhere it in place. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using the same floral pattern paper for the background. For the second card, I used gold and yellow ink for the leaves. Using the same card sketch, I have more pattern paper from the Homestead Harvest Collection, and this time I'm adding some fun texture using the new Burlap 3D embossing folder. I'll put ATG tape on the back and also some glue along the very outside edge. Then I'll layer it on some brown cardstock. With all of that texture, it does help to have some extra adhesive on the back so it stays together. Now I'll put ATG tape on the back and add my card front onto a card base. I'm leaving 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. I'm following the same card design, so I've already stamped, cut out the sentiment, images, and I've already added foam dimension on the back. For the narrow strip on the right side of the card, using this beautiful plaid paper, I've already layered it on some dark brown cardstock. I'll remove the release paper and adhere it in place. Next, I'll add the Happy Autumn sentiment. I used a pretty teal color for the flowers and 2 different shades of orange ink for the leaves. After adhering the sentiment, I'll first add the leaf that has foam dimension on the back. Then I'll glue a second leaf above it. Then I'll add one of the teal flowers, and I did pop up all of these with thin foam squares. I'll add the leaf on the bottom, then a flower, then finally the orange leaf in the middle and the final flower. Next, I'll put glue on the back of the banner and adhere it in the upper left-hand corner. So there is my finished card, and I did make 2 using the same pattern paper for the background. I know it looks slightly different, but it's from the same sheet. For the second card, I did change the ink on the leaves. I have gold and the darker orange color. I was having so much fun with this card design, I ended up making a total of 10 cards. All of the background paper is from the Heartfelt Harvest Collection. For 8 of the cards, I embossed them using the Burlap 3D embossing folder. I selected different ink colors for the flowers depending on the pattern paper. I made 2 cards in a cheery yellow, 2 in a pretty pink, and the final 2 cards have a brown and blue distressed background. I know the cards don't have a traditional fall look to them, but I still think they work. I love the beautiful flowers, and it's nice that Honeybee Stamps has a stencil set. That way people like me that don't color can still enjoy the beautiful stamped images. If you are interested in any of the products I used in this video, I do have links provided in the description box below. Honeybee Stamps' new Heartfelt Harvest release is filled with so many fun products. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.